been an awakening. Have you felt it?
Light it up.
Punch it.
Welcome to Unmistakably Star Wars, your source for a high-quality, informative, and entertaining look into the Star Wars galaxy. So strap yourself in, because here's where the fun begins.
Well, Jeremy, it's, my goodness, it's been a couple years since we've had this much excitement around the USW World Headquarters, and it's amazing that the line of photographers and news vans outside the studio right now are staying at bay in order to keep the peace within the area. But we've got exciting news. I don't know if you were aware, but our very own Eve won an award, a major award this week.
A major award.
A major award. Not since 2015, 2016, when this little podcast grabbed the top prize of Best New Star Wars Podcast of the Year have we been this proud and braggadocious. And Eve, you were not only nominated, but you won. You won Fangirl of the Week. Tell us about that.
It's actually Fangirl of the Day, but it's through
blowing all momentum we had going, but go ahead.
I can't take too much credit.
All right.
Thank you to the lovely Meg Cullinan for nominating me.
Yeah.
Because she's a jewel. Thank you.
She
but yeah,
is. So
somehow,
what does it mean? Do you get like better parking at the Wawa or the Starbucks? Do you get a plaque for your refrigerator? What does that mean? Fangirl of the Day. By the way, I'm only like 1/7 as excited as I was since we've gone from a week to a day. But nonetheless.
I think it just means my picture's up on Ashley's Twitter for 24 hours.
Wow. Well, that's exciting.
Yeah.
My picture's never been on Ashley's Twitter. In fact, when I say that, it kind of sounds naughty.
Oh, Lord. Yes.
Well, my little tauntauns, we are off to a smashing start on this one. Welcome to episode 122 of Unmistakably Star Wars. My name is Devin Cleffer, and I am your curator of content this week. Joining me in the world headquarters of Unmistakably Star Wars, the one and only one on our entire team that speaks Ewok. The fun Auntie Bex. We're going to get to that in a minute.
Hey, guys.
Also from the West Coast, the one and only Mr. Jeremy Scott.
Howdy.
And representing not only the East Coast, not only Philadelphia, but all of Twitter for one 24-hour period as Fangirl of the Day, the very impressive Eve.
Hey, everybody.
So listen, we could end the podcast right now with that much excitement going on. There's no doubt. We can just hit stop, post this thing, and we're done. But since we got you here, we decided we'll stick around for a little bit. We got some exciting stuff coming up. We've been talking about fan fiction on the podcast here for the past several weeks. In fact, we're at the last couple days of our fan fiction contest. And by the time that listeners actually hear this, the recorded version of this, for those of you watching live on the Twitter right now, you still have time to vote. But the folks that will be listening to this on the podcast the voting will be done. This time next week, we will have our winners. We'll be announcing our winners. I cannot promise, Bex, that it's going to be as exciting as Eve getting Fangirl of the Day. But I'm hopeful.
It's going to be pretty good.
It's going to be pretty good. It's going to be a solid pretty good.
It's going to be a solid pretty good.
Solid pretty good. So we're going to talk about a fanfic movie that is actually upon us, and it's kind of interesting. It's fascinating to me, and Jeremy, weigh in on this. One of the things that is amazing in fandom to me right now is that the ability to create something with video and sound and effects is like never before. I mean, I would have killed to be able to create things like this when we were, in our early 20s and stuff.
I know, it's amazing, isn't it? And for Star Wars fans, I guess it was Troops, that film that Rubio made like a back in the day,
right?
In the Star Wars fan film. But now, Gosh, man, the technology is so amazing. I had a project my students did recently, and the best film that my students did was incredible, better than anything I had seen in a while, and they basically had all the equipment they needed, and they were able to make it on a relatively cheap budget, and it's extraordinary. And so it's insane what can be made and what can be done, and if you do have just a little bit of money, you can surprise some people with what you can make.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, especially for those working on a Mac. I mean, you have so much right at your disposal. It's awesome. So we'll talk a little bit about this fanfic film that's coming out. We're also going to talk about, Disney trademarked this thing called Star Wars Resistance. So we're going to give our speculation of what that may or may not be. So we'll take a look at that. And then, we'll get into some Cantina talk. Just when you thought, Bex, just when you thought The Last Jedi was gone from theaters, gone from our memory banks, looking forward only to Han Solo.
No.
It's still around. It's still around. So we'll talk about what some of the remnants are when it comes to The Last Jedi. And then in our closer look segment, for those of you that had a chance to see The Force of Sound that was released on abcnews.com, I believe last week, perhaps the week before, good friend of the pod, Clayton Sandell, oversaw that production, and we're going to take a closer look at sound design within Star Wars, and that is actually going to feature an interview we did this past week with Clayton himself. So, the news is next, my little tauntauns. Stick around.
I have good news for you, my lord. That's so interesting.
Wait, there's something very weak coming through.
All right, Bex, lead us off with this week's news. We've got some fanfic movie action.
Yes. Well, I mean, there are so many fanfic films out there.
Yes, fanfic films, also known as F-cubed.
Okay. Yes, I guess that is
You got that?
true.
All right, little math joke for you.
I haven't been in school for a long time to get math
Clearly.
jokes. Just to let you know.
I don't even teach math, and I'm giving the math jokes. Go ahead. Bex, talk to us.
So there is this film called Odyssey, A Star Wars Story, and it is creating a lot of buzz.
I can feel the energy coursing out.
I gotta say, Twitterverse, I'm super nervous to be live on Twitter
Yes.
right now.
Yes.
It's making me all wonky. Oh, man. So this film is coming out. It's set 5 years before Rogue One.
Okay.
And what we know about it so far is it follows, the quote says, the story follows a young rebel named Quinn on his first recon mission outside of training. When Quinn makes a decision to ignore his orders of not intervening in civilian affairs, the situation goes from bad to worse. And it sounds like it's obviously a war type movie like Rogue One was. And the creators said we wanted the audience to feel like this was a universe they still knew with the, Star Wars and stormtroopers, but the action in the story and cinematography had to go to new places. We had to be bold and say, what would it look like if we made a Vietnam style war movie, but with Star Wars?
Wow.
So I'm really excited.
What now? So they're comparing it to something that's like Rogue One.
Right.
So what has you most excited about that? Is it the fact that it's going to be another gritty war action film or what?
I think it's mostly that it's from the fans' perspective, what they would want to see in Star Wars.
Yeah.
And there, are tons and tons of movies and they're made all the time. And, we had our own story contest which has a lot of great
it does.
entries.
Yeah.
And I really encourage everybody to read them and vote. And I don't know. I'm excited to see it put on film. A lot of what's put out there isn't necessarily newsworthy.
What?
I know. I'm sorry. That doesn't mean it's not good.
Right.
But I feel like this project is a step above good. It's that next jump that we want, that I think fanfic is taking.
So it's not quite fangirl for the week, but it's definitely fangirl for the day material.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Maybe day and a half.
Whoa.
I know.
A full 36 hours.
pushing the boundaries.
Okay, I like it. And so, do we have a release date on this yet? Is it upon us yet?
Not that I can find.
Okay.
Yeah, it's May 4th.
May 4th.
Well, that is a great date.
Thank you, Jeremy.
So, Jeremy, jump in here. You know, we touched base before the news as far as the ability to really go off as filmmakers and create something that is spectacular. And shed the idea of me actually mentioning this, but there was last year there was a fan-produced Star Trek film, and it actually they had financial backing and everything, and then Paramount shut them down.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing about Lucas is George Lucas historically embraced the parodies, but also the fan films, like, back with Hardware Wars back in the day, he was so supportive and kind of laughed along with it, and occasionally there were few exceptions of him not doing that. And so Lucasfilm in general, and I'm really curious with Disney, they haven't done anything yet, but Lucasfilm before the Disney acquisition, they were really like very warm toward the fan films.
Right.
And to see something like this being made with, they have a Kickstarter campaign, so you can go on Kickstarter and, look up Odyssey Film and like support them. Like you can give money to the project. They have a video like proof of concept, just shows just all the work that they've already put into it. But I mean, with Star Wars, you have so many cosplayers making amazing things, and you just had the costuming stuff, discussions on. I mean, there is stuff that can be made that looks so authentic, and in some cases, like if you look at the droid builders, those guys have been employed by Lucasfilm, and so there are so many fans creating amazing things that it makes a lot of sense that if you wanted to kickstart a project and you can show proof of your concept and what you're trying to do, man, people will give you money and they'll jump on board. And not only that, you can probably get a lot of people in the, in Rebel Legion and 101st, all these like, amazing, craftsmen and cosplayers get involved. And so, I mean, just looking at some of the stuff they've already done, I'm really excited. And the story is compelling too. I'm not against leaving more war films, especially with, what Beck said, just kind of this Vietnam concept. That's kind of compelling to me. So yeah, like bring it and let's see what happens. And I'm really excited about this.
Eve, jump in here. What are some of your thoughts when it comes to another Rogue One type film, but fan produced?
I'm excited. I think that it looks really cool. I think the feel of it is right down in that kind of gritty, well-worn, kind of battle-intensive Star Wars that Rogue One did deliver, although it does remind me of, and I cannot remember the actual news site that reported this, but John Boyega was talking about The Last Jedi. Do you remember this? And he said it would be a war movie unlike any other Star Wars war movie. And at some point on this Odyssey Kickstarter page, they say that this film will be a Star Wars story like no other. So I'm wondering kind of if this is like going to be a trend that we see, that every Star Wars movie, even if it's fan made, has to kind of outdo the war from the other Star Wars movies.
Ooh, interesting. Let's outdo Lucasfilm and Disney.
That might be the thing that shuts it down, though.
That's ambitious.
But
ahead,
do you
Dex.
think if this film is super successful, and I mean, would we want to see Disney maybe pick it up and make it canon? Like put some.
I don't know, like actually, like before it's actually delivered to fans, to viewers.
No, like after the fans are allowed to see it after May 4th, if it has this amazing outpour from fans, Disney come in and be like, "Hey guys, we would like to."
I would be shocked if that happened.
Well,
yeah, I want recognition, yes, and I think even on like StarWars.com in the past, years past, they would have, fan film kind of like competitions, and they would highlight fan films. I would love to see that. And people that have done amazing work in the past, they've gotten gigs doing other stuff in Hollywood.
Yeah.
So I would love to see a springboard for these filmmakers maybe onto other things or get some, unique jobs thrown their way. But, it's a great way to get seen, and especially if you make something compelling. But I think Lucasfilm is and it could, the way I say this can come across so negatively, and I don't mean it that way, but they want control over the story and where they're going and what they're doing. And I think because they've planned so far ahead, I mean, we only can guess at how far down the road they're thinking. I think projects like this, it would never be viewed other than sort of, almost like, oh, look at this amazing project these fans made. But I don't think there would be a consideration of making it anything more than that. But it could highlight, some really neat storytelling ideas and concepts that maybe later will be picked up by the Star Wars storytellers that Lucasfilm hires. So you never know what the influence could be. Right. So I'm curious about this and just looking at it. And I really encourage everyone to look at, go on to the Kickstarter and take a look at it and look at these videos on YouTube. It's really worth checking out. It seems like the quality of work they're putting in and the accessibility of equipment. You can make some stuff with not a crazy budget. Yeah. And so I can't wait for May the 4th. I mean, it's going to be, not only is it a special day for Star Wars fans, but this is a good little gift to us from fans, which is a lot of fun. So,
well, and it's something that we've talked about before on the pod is what a great way to really engage with your fandom and to not just be a consumer, but to be a creator and to really take passion, whether it's for Star Wars or filmmaking or both, and to really give back to the community. I think that that's so amazing that they would invest the time, the talents, the money, and produce something that's going to be shared with all of fandom. I think it's absolutely great. Jeremy, you mentioned looking forward and stuff. You've got something for us this week that actually involves something that may be right around the corner. What have you got for us this week?
Yeah, so just recently, a lot of people got a buzz, and I think it all started with Yak Face, which is a great website, great group of Star Wars fans that really, focus on the toys and merchandising and collectibles and all that stuff. And they were just doing a check of trademarks, just like all Star Wars fans do. And they found, all these registrations for the title Star Wars Resistance. And so it was everything from toys, games, gymnastics, sporting stuff, video games, handheld electronic stuff, clothing, footwear. I mean, it was everything, even like cardboard stuff, printed things, publications, books. It's more than just maybe a video game tie-in, or it just feels like more. And of course, it's like, they even in this in getting all these trademarks and everything, it was sound, images, video, recording, digital stuff. I mean, it's a ton that they registered, and so it's gotten everyone a buzz. And it seems like people are thinking, is this the next animated project? And if so, when will we see this? Is this on the Disney streaming, which it probably will be? Right. Could it be maybe live action television? That's always a possibility. But we do know that, I think before Celebration in Orlando, there was talk that they were already at work on whatever the next animated series would be. That they were already done with Rebels or close to being done with Rebels, and they were already moving on to other things and working on other things. So it's possible that Star Wars Resistance is the next animated, thing that they do. I'm curious, are you excited about another, potential animated series? Or I don't know how invested you guys are in Rebels. Like, do you need to mourn the ending of Rebels a little bit more before you can think about something else? I'm curious. Just
it's my rebound animation show.
It might be looking good, though.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things, Jeremy, that you brought up. I think one, I was around, give or take, Celebration last year, and Orlando when there was actually a job listing on the interwebs for Lucasfilm and an animator or someone that had worked in animation before. So
I think you like texted that to me.
Yeah. And I'm thinking like, man, if it's for stick figures, I'm in.
Could they be doing cartwheels?
Exactly. But at the same time, you know, a good friend of the pod, author Adam Bray, had thought when he came on in September, I believe it was, talking about that he thought by next fall we might have our next animated series. Whether this is it or not, who knows? But I'd love to know, Bex, from you, one, does this sound appealing if indeed it's an animated series? And if it's not, what do you think it might be or hope that it would be?
Well, I actually haven't really watched any of the animated series.
Okay.
So if it was another animated series,
Meh.
great.
But you've got a son at home.
I do. And I actually have Star Wars Rebels Season 1 on Blu-ray, but we haven't started watching it yet.
Awesome.
I can't get...
Well, listen, it's been great having you on the pod. We'll miss you.
He just isn't interested in it.
Wow. All right.
So, I mean, what can you say? He's 5. It's not like he's got good taste yet.
Wow. Well, it's up to your job to mold him then. Eve, let me swing it over to your way. What do you think?
I'm slowly getting through season 2 of Rebels.
Yeah.
So I would not be mourning Rebels because I don't believe that I'd be finished by the time Resistance comes around, just at the pace I'm going.
Sure.
But I don't know, my gut kind of feels like it's a live action thing.
Whoa.
Because of all the job postings and just the across the board marketing. It feels live action-y to me.
Well, and here's something that I'm interested in. Jeremy, weigh in on this. They do have the trademark for so many things, like you mentioned, from print stuff to cardboard stuff to gymnastic stuff to whatever. Do you think any of that, or what percentage of that do you think might just be smokescreen? Like they're just kind of like they're going to register it across the board, but it's really just going to be this one sliver of thing that they're going to focus on?
Yeah, and that's always the possibility, right? I mean, they could just be covering their bases. Like, oh, we have this thing coming out. It could be like an app for a phone, a game, and they're just like, let's just cover our bases. It does feel a little bit more than that, just when you do the comparisons to other projects that have been smaller from Lucasfilm and Disney. And so I get a hunch that, like Eve said, it might be live action, which is really interesting to me that they would, if it is the Resistance time period during this new sequel, the sequel trilogy, that'd be kind of interesting to do that. I think fans, I keep hearing from fans, I don't know about you guys, but like if I were to think of a project, I would think like Old Republic stuff, and go back in time. But I hear so many fans express a desire for something a little more, a little different than what we're seeing. In terms of the time period. So I'm just real curious about all that. I think animation makes some sense. Could this be, could we see an Ezra Bridger, as an older person, and as sort of like an Obi-Wan Kenobi for a new animated series? I don't know.
Yeah.
It would sort of make some sense to go Clone Wars, Rebels, Resistance, in terms of animated projects, and you can continue the threads of characters that you've seen in the Clone Wars and, or the lineage, just like you would see in the live action films. And so it does, for me, make some sense that it could be animation. But we'll see. If it is a live action project, I wonder what the animation project is, because we know they're working on one. So what would it be? It just makes logical sense to me, just that it's animation. But if Eve's right and it is like, this is a live action thing, I'm really interested, what they're going to do and what angle they're going to take. Who would they cast? Do you bring in someone from the films, like for, a part here and there? So it's really going to be an interesting time. They've said, like, with the live action stuff, that there might be more than one project. So a lot to consider. Maybe it's both, but I'm just, I'm really curious about all this.
Well, Jeremy, if you were going to pitch an idea to Auntie Katie, whether it's live action or whether it's animated, what would you want to see come to our Disney digital streaming service come next fall?
Yeah, I would. I think We'll see how Han Solo plays, right? And they're already down the road. You know, they've already pitched ideas. They're making whatever they're making.
Right.
But, we'll see how Han Solo does. There's always that interest in like the bounty hunters and like, you know, the underworld kind of, and, you know, they did have that underworld project that Lucas, you know, had all these writers work on, you know, and they wrote all those scripts that they've been mining for a while now. I personally, when I interviewed Alex Freed, who's written like the Rogue One novel and then the Battlefront Twilight Company novel, which if you haven't read that, it's phenomenal. We were talking and I asked him, I go, if you could write anything or work on anything, what would it be? And he said how he's always been really interested in the mystical side of Star Wars, which it totally, that's my love language. When he said that, I was like, yes, me too. And, you know, I would love to see something set back. Or maybe Old Republic, maybe not. It doesn't. Maybe it's 200 years before, you know, before the prequels. But I would love to delve into the mystical side of Star Wars. We've gotten the war films, we got the Underworld film with Solo, and we have Rogue One. Obviously, we have the Skywalker, you know, saga, but I would love to see other characters that are Force users, focusing on them, dealing into the mystical side of things. I think there's a lot there to be mined, and I'm hoping for something like that. And obviously, if you go Old Republic, you know, there is the wars with the Sith, plural. It's not just two; it's more, and so you could have some really epic stuff. If you wanted to go there, and I think fans would eat that up. I think that would be something everyone would tune into.
Absolutely. No, I like that idea. Bex, weigh in here. If you can't have an animated show because you're not going to watch it, what is something that
I wouldn't? I have no way to watch it.
Right. Okay. Let me rephrase. Since you're not going to watch an animated show,
I'm not going to watch an animated. Yes.
What would you want to? What would be compelling to you to watch? Animated, live action, whatever. But what like storyline would be compelling to you?
So that's not where I took this question at all when I read the show notes.
Okay. So when it says pitch your animated live action series,
I was thinking live action, and I was thinking more like game show style, like create a Star Wars game show.
Who can survive the Sarlacc?
Because, like, have you seen? There's that.
Luke's lightsaber is so big, he put blank next to it.
No, not that kind of game show. Terrible. No, more like, you know, was it America's Top Ninja Warrior?
Yeah,
like
more
that kind of like Beastmaster,
like people in cosplay, like doing the
like beat Star Wars.
Wow.
You know, like a whole series of tests and...
I'm so intrigued by that. It's like Battle of the Network Stars meets Star Wars.
Kind of.
Wow.
And then like at the end you get to battle whoever if you make it.
Wow. And it's like Ray Park there and he's just like kicking everybody's arse.
Pretty much.
That would be pretty amazing. Okay, well, despite your take on that, I love that. I'm going to give my pitch. Here's my pitch.
Okay.
I want, if you're familiar with the films Sands of Iwo Jima and Flags of Our Fathers, right? So we've got two sides to one story, right? I want a live action series that's going to follow an X-Wing battalion and a TIE fighter battalion. And I want to get to know, and I want to really fall in love with the characters from both sides. I want to be super compelling. Okay. And then when there's these battles, I want to feel lost for whomever dies. I want to be totally compelling. Yeah. I want to see some awesome dogfighting, and I want to feel like I would get punched in the gut every time a character on The Walking Dead dies. That's what I want.
You know, that was like the Battlestar. Yeah, that's great. That's like Battlestar Galactica, like 2004. You know, it was kind of like bouncing between the Cylons and the humans. That's a great pitch. I'll tune into that.
Oh, see, got one more. Fangirl of the I almost said a week. Day. Fangirl of the day. What do you got? What's your take on this? What is your pitch?
I love your idea. You kind of stole mine.
Oh, I am fanboy of the day.
There you go. You stole my crown. It happens. It reminds me a little bit, not directly at all, so don't come after me. I did play and beat the game, but Battlefront 2. I liked how I felt for Iden Versio and her character and how she started and where she ended up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can't say much more without spoiling you.
Right. and that involved a little bit of everything from ground warfare to space combat to everything, right?
Yep.
Okay.
That's fantastic.
Wouldn't that be interesting if there was a game that was modeled like almost the same storyline as whatever was going on screen? Versus the other way around where they're making video games based on, or rather movies based on video games. Yeah. Interesting. Eve, I'm going to stick with you. What have we got for us this week in the news?
So, quick, teeny tiny little Wired article about all of the amazing things coming on The Last Jedi special features, which, first and foremost, are you guys fans of this? Do you sit down and pop that disc in after the movie and go through each and everything, or do you pick and choose? And if so, are you super pumped because we have 14 deleted scenes, we have 2 hours of extra content, and Rian Johnson doing the entire film commentary?
Yeah. No, I'm so pumped for this. I just tweeted at Rian Johnson, thank you for the documentary he's going to be including, The Director and the Jedi. It's South by Southwest. They're going to premiere it the day before it comes out digitally. So before The Last Jedi comes out digitally. So I don't know about you guys, but when I looked through the list of bonus features, The Director and the Jedi jumped out at me. It screamed George Lucas content that we saw like with the prequels. You know, the beginning documentary is phenomenal.
Yes, agreed.
They're saying this is a feature length, and I wonder exactly what is the runtime, but everything I've read on it, it really is going into this journey that Rian Johnson takes on making this movie, and that's really compelling to me. So sign me up. I cannot wait. The process of making any movie is always intriguing to me. I sort of have a fetish when it comes to like documentaries about films. I don't know about you guys, but like, you know, in the Heart of Darkness about Coppola making Apocalypse Now, that's like one of the craziest documentaries. There's so many good ones about making movies, especially like crazy movies. And so I love this stuff, and just and being a huge fan of Star Wars, I cannot wait. So that's the one that jumps out at me. What about you guys as you look at this list?
I like the scene breakdowns. I like knowing what went into specific things in the movie, so I'm excited about those.
I always go back and forth. There's part of me that doesn't want to see behind the curtain. Like I just want to keep the fantasy alive. But Eve, you brought up something at the get-go that I thought was interesting. You said which one we pop in after the movie, and I think I'm more apt to actually watch these before the movie and then go through and watch the movie after that.
I do the same thing.
Yeah. I'm leaning more in the direction of appreciating the deleted scenes and how things are made and all that, but there's still part of me that I'm just like, oh, I didn't want to know that Tauntauns aren't real. Eve, what about you, though? What are you most looking forward to with this great collection of content we're going to get?
It's a toss between the deleted scenes. I love getting that extra content to see kind of what didn't fit, why it was cut, or what might have fit, but just for some reason ended up not in it. And I love listening to the director commentary going through the film to get that extra kind of, this is what I was thinking at this scene. So.
You know, I'm curious, and Eve, let me stick with you on this. Do you think that going through this director's cut, do you think that more people will have an appreciation for this film after that, even some of the haters, if they have the patience to actually watch it? Do you think it'll actually illuminate them and their understanding of the film?
I put yourself in the hater shoe. If you do not like a film, if you are so against it, would you even buy it?
I bet you people will buy it. Even the haters will buy it. Because Star Wars fans need a complete collection. That's what it's at. I hate this film. Here's where it's going to go on my shelf. Yeah.
It'll stay in the plastic and never get opened.
Yes.
But
I'll never watch it.
I've got the completed collection.
So, Eve, you don't think it's going to actually bring anyone over to the light side of appreciating the film?
No, I think some people, it might soften their approach. If they just take the time to sit down and say, okay, let's give it, a third or fourth chance and see how I feel.
Right.
Could happen.
Yeah, and I think I'm hopeful with that. I think that, some of the more thoughtful commentary I've read by fans, I don't want to say like defending The Last Jedi. I don't think it needs to be defended for one, but two, I think they've not had knee-jerk reactionary responses sometimes. And I think some of the more thoughtful pieces I've read, it even helped me as someone who appreciated the film from the get-go to go, oh, wow, I really like how they're explaining that. Jeremy, let me ask you this. With the deleted scenes, will you be standing by waiting for some fan to put together the supercut and put all those deleted scenes back into the film and watch it from start to finish?
You know, it's so weird when it comes to deleted scenes. You know, when I look at the list, like I'm going to watch them. It'll probably be the first thing I watch. But if they're, I kind of go by the philosophy of they're deleted for a reason, and so I don't necessarily need them reincorporated. They're more of a curiosity to me.
Sure.
So you know, like kind of like Eve said, you know, she was talking about like the commentary is really what that's my close second. It's the documentary, the director and the Jedi, then the commentary. I would think my third favorite thing or the third thing I'm really looking forward to is, I don't know. Did you guys see this Andy Serkis live one night only?
Yeah.
He shows these two sequences from the movie with just Andy Serkis before the digital makeover into Snoke, and so you really get to see him act. And you know what, Serkis is just turning in performance after performance, from Gollum to Caesar and the Planet of the Apes.
Right.
That's great.
You know, which was a great performance, and you know, and of course Snoke. I really loved the performance he gave of Snoke. I really did. So I think that's another thing I'm looking for. But the deleted scenes is much more of a curiosity. I'm like, oh, I wonder what they cut, you know, and I'll watch them, and then I'll go on to the other stuff. But that's kind of where I land. What about you guys? Do you really, is the deleted scene the things that you're really looking forward to?
I think for me, it just really comes down on what exactly it is. I know the original cut was, like 3 hours and 20 minutes or something crazy like that. And so I know that they cut some stuff for the sake of time, and it'll just be interesting to see what those actually unfold to be. And there might be something that I fall in love with. The ones from The Force Awakens didn't really impress me a lot. It was like, it was all right. But it didn't really.
The only one from that was Kylo going on to the Falcon.
Right.
It was a little redundant, so I got why they cut it. But that was the only one that I found compelling.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Eve, anything else that you want to talk about with this particular topic?
No, I'm excited. Bring on. Oh, actually, are you guys going to do the digital on March 13th or the physical copy on the 27th?
Yes.
I'm a whore. I'll buy the digital and then
Same.
But here's the question, though, right? Because
myself out.
There will be different packaging available for the physical copy. So I don't even know if all the differences have been unveiled at this point. But do you typically have a spot that you go to? I know Target usually has their own packaging. I think Best Buy historically has had their own packaging. Do you have a go-to source for your physical copy? Copy?
That too, right?
Yes. Your physical copy, Jeremy?
Because I have like massive anxiety disorders when I walk into a Target, you know, I'll probably just buy it on Amazon.
Yes.
Skip the trauma that sometimes occurs when I go to that or Walmart, go to Target or Walmart. So
yes.
Yeah, I'll just buy it on Amazon and let it be mailed to me.
Yeah, I don't see a need to ever go to a store again now that Amazon delivers groceries and stuff. Bex, how about you?
Well, I'm part of the Disney Movie Club.
Oh.
And so I get to pre-order a copy, and I get a free lithograph with it.
You get a lithograph. What is the lithograph?
I don't know yet. They haven't released the little picture.
Wow, okay.
But with Rogue One, I got one of the stormtroopers on the beach.
Wow.
So that was pretty cool.
Vacationing on the beach, a little drink with an umbrella in it. It was amazing.
It was part of the deleted
Greetings
scenes.
from
Did you
Scarab.
not see that?
Yes, I did. Eve, what about you? Will you be getting the digital copy only? Will you be getting both? What will you do?
Both.
Both.
I cannot wait. And then I need to hold it, so it's kind of a combination of both. And I am with Star Wars movies. I can't wait for Amazon, so I have to go.
That 2 days
Whoever
is
has
crazy.
The shinier copy.
Yeah. I will wait for the physical copy because typically Disney releases a copy that includes the digital version, Blu-ray, DVD.
Yep.
So I will do that.
That's what I get.
Yeah.
So I have all three covered.
And Devin, you know, you asked about you were talking about the deleted scenes earlier, and like, you know, what is it? Here are the list of the scenes themselves. You have alternate opening is one. Paige's gun jam. So I'm guessing it's in the bomber sequence at the beginning. Luke has a moment. Poe, not much of a sewer. And the next one, it's kind of weird that you recorded that. And then the next one,
guess what my new ringtone is.
Here we go. Here's another one. The caretaker sizes up Ray. Then the next one is caretaker village sequence, which I think that might be in the trailer we saw Ray running. I think that's it.
Yeah.
I think that's it. That's that scene. Extended Fathier chase, Mega Destroyer incursion, extended version. Rose bites the hand that taunts her. And then Phasma squealed like a whooped hog.
What?
Yes.
No! Why am I getting flashbacks of Ned Beatty in Deliverance? Oh my gosh.
Rose and Finn go to where they belong, and then Ray and Chewie and the Falcon. I'm curious about that one. And then the costumes and creatures of Canto Bight. So those are the list of the scene titles.
I'm just going to go on record right now. This whole Phasma squeals like a whatever. Look, I know for a fact there was a scene that they filmed, and maybe this is really a poor way to title it, but I know that there was one where Finn basically calls her out and says, it was your fault that Starkiller Base got blowed up, and she ends up killing other stormtroopers to save her reputation. Now, I don't know if that's labeled as she... What did you say, Jeremy? Squeals like what?
A whoop pig.
Oh, my gosh. What? No, that's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. Stop the presses on printing that on the sleeve.
It's true.
Oh my gosh. Well, listen, talking about films and all the things we love about them, we're going to jump into our closer look, and we're going to actually take a closer look at sound design in Star Wars, of course, based on the Force of Sound that was produced on ABC News by Clayton Sandell. And this is also going to include a brief talk with Clayton Sandell and some of the things that didn't make the final cut in the documentary. So stick around. We'll be right back with our closer look.
I'm going in closer to one of the big ones.
Closer? The closer I have than you.
A certain point of view.
Same thing I always do, talk my way out of it.
The ability to speak does not make you intelligent.
I never asked that question until after I've done it.
You're going to find that many of the truths we cling to depend greatly on our own point of view.
All right, well, welcome back to our Closer Look segment. And this week we're taking a closer look at sound design. I was watching an interview with Ben Burtt, who is legendary, obviously, with Star Wars. He's the creator of so many of the sounds that are a part of our DNA. And one of the things that I found fascinating, he was talking about before Star Wars, sound was basically what you recorded live on set, the soundtrack, right? And then maybe some tweaks in the studio. But the title of sound designer, literally designing sounds, was never a thing before Star Wars. And I thought that was so amazing to even think about, that literally he was so, I guess, genius about realizing the impact that sound had within a movie, that he literally crafted a job to fit that, which I think is fantastic. So, let's jump into this a little bit. And Jeremy, let me begin with you on this. When it comes to sound design, those things that we just kind of take for granted as part of the Star Wars films, whether it's the sound of stormtrooper boots in the Death Star or on a bridge of a Star Destroyer, or rebel boots that sound different based on where they're running. Like, what are some of the things that I guess has influenced you and your fandom when it comes to Star Wars and sound design?
Wow, that's a great question. And just there's a lot to consider when you start to really in the documentary that Clayton Sandell did for ABC. It's incredible, and all the other like documentaries out there about what the people working on Star Wars have done. It's really helped. At least it's helped me to see, and hopefully other people, just the power that sound has. And it really, and I'm sure we'll go into this in more detail as we go, but like it elicits emotion and it helps you believe. I think that's one of the biggest things where whether that it's a noise of a ship or, a pod race, a pod race or, a blaster or the lightsaber, whatever it is, it makes me believe so much more in what I'm witnessing on the screen. And that's one of the things that I find so interesting about the sound design, when you're able to design multiple sounds to bring out, elicit emotion from the audience. But not only that, like, we believe it. It helps in that concept of the willing suspension of disbelief as we watch these movies. And I think sometimes we underestimate the power that sound does. So I'm really curious about the Academy Awards coming up. Who's going to win for, editing and mixing for sound? I'm really curious, because there's some really amazing films that are nominated this year.
Yeah, agreed. So before we get too far down the road, let's actually take a listen to the interview with Clayton Sandell. Then when we come back, I want to go ahead and talk not just about that, but we'll kind of weave that in together with the documentary, The Force of Sound. So here is the interview with Clayton Sandell. Star Wars, and we are taking just a moment to talk about this great documentary that hit the interwebs this last week, and that, of course, is The Force of Sound, an ABC News feature that took a look at the sound design of The Last Jedi. And better than that, we've got the guy behind the documentary, and that is ABC correspondent, also Good Morning America and Nightline, but even more important than that, he's a friend of the pod. So Clayton Sandell, welcome back.
Absolutely. Yes. How are you? Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. We are doing great. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to hang out with us.
Oh, I wouldn't miss it. There's anytime I can chat Star Wars and hang out, it's an awesome thing. So thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. So listen, a year ago, January, you were kind enough to bring us a kind of a behind the scenes with ILM and what they did in Rogue One with Tarkin and K2SO. And then here we are, we're going to headquarters up in Marin County, seeing Skywalker Ranch, and we're going to take a look at the sound behind Star Wars. And so I guess first off, what was kind of the genesis behind doing this documentary?
Well, there were two things. So, I mean, I'll go way back to, being a kid and watching these sound documentaries. Like I'm sure we've all watched, of Ben Burt doing his thing where he's like hitting a guy wire with a wrench and all of a sudden this crazy blaster sound comes out, or watching him wave the lightsaber around or record bears and walruses and all that kind of stuff that he did, and just being fascinated with how all of that worked. And so that was sort of the basic inspiration for this. And then after that, Rogue One visual effects, special that we did for Nightline with ILM, we were sitting around and talking about, how the those visual effects punks always get all the glory, right? And it seems like the sound, which is, as Matthew Wood at Skywalker Sound says, that George Lucas told him, sound's always 50% of a movie, but it doesn't get the attention that it deserves. So I was having a conversation with some pals at Lucasfilm, and they kind of went back and forth and were kicking around ideas, and they suggested something on Skywalker Sound, and it took me about a millisecond to go, yes, let's do something with Skywalker Sound, knowing that would get us through the gates of Skywalker Ranch, because that's where where they're based. So we kicked the idea around for basically about a year, and finally were able to go up there and make it happen, and have them just pull the curtain back on how they do sound design, which to me is infinitely fascinating. So what I wanted to do was kind of recreate those old videos and give you kind of a master class in sound design with these guys, and also at the same time kind of take my fellow fans with me to Skywalker Ranch.
Yeah, it was absolutely amazing to not only get beyond the front gate, but to actually see how some of these sounds are created. And, early on in the documentary, Rin Kleiss, who, by the way, is a great Star Wars name in and of itself, but he says when sound is done right, the viewer actually believes what they're seeing is making that sound, and that, Ben Burt also talks about, sound should be invisible in the sense that you shouldn't notice it other than when it's not there or it doesn't sound appropriate. So kind of with that in mind, what are some things that really kind of came to you maybe seeing it for the first time behind the scenes?
It was fascinating to me that, I figured over 40 years and all of Ben Burt's work and the work of everybody else that has come after him and worked with him over the years, you kind of have it in your mind that, well, they've got every Star Wars sound they need, surely. You have this database, and it's a database. They pull it up on a computer. They can search for, TIE Fighter or Millennium Falcon, and all of these sounds pop up, and you figure, well, what else is there to do in 2018? But it turns out there's a tremendous amount to do because, Matt Wood and Ren said that, the first thing they do is start going through the script and focusing on those things, that are new. And of course, there's always something new. There's a new ship. There's a new creature, a new alien, whatever it is, a new weapon. And you have to start, marking up your script and trying to figure out, all right, what is that going to sound like? And so it's a creation of a whole bunch of new things, and that involves going out and recording things. They went out and recorded old cars, and they went out and recorded, old cars, for example, on those speeder things on Crate. I know there's a name for them, and somebody in the audience is shouting, they're called this. But anyway, those rickety old speeders on Crate, were partially this old car that they went and recorded and pulled some of the spark plugs out of it so that it was even a rougher noise. One of the things that you see in the documentary is they actually went to the, Skywalker Ranch, chicken coop and recorded these chickens, sped them up, processed them a little bit, and then combined them with various things, including they had an intern who was working for them who had a turkey call and knew how to do turkey calls, and came into Ren's edit room there. Ren's got a microphone right behind his desk, and this guy, Nick Doctor, stood there and did the turkey calls, and so that's how they kind of pieced all of this together. So that, along with the fact that the Foley artists really do put a lot of passion into their performance. It's not just making a random sound that then you can paste into the timeline and match up with footsteps. It really is. They put a lot of thought into how things sound. And, one thing I had never thought of, but now when I watch the movie, it's exactly what I focus on is they say that when, like, footsteps on a Star Destroyer versus footsteps on a Rebel cruiser are going to sound different. They want the footsteps on a Star Destroyer to sound heavier and more ominous, whereas on a Rebel cruiser, they want the footsteps to sound lighter and a little more positive. And, so it really is fascinating just how much thought and effort goes into planning and thinking through how all these sounds are going to serve the story.
Well, let's talk about the Foley artists for just a moment, because I was especially fascinated by their job. And, you talk about this in the documentary itself, talks about very much like an old-fashioned 1930s, 1940s radio production in a lot of ways. And, some of the camera footage that you get shows them using what appears to be some type of wind chime. And when it comes to selecting even the right type of wind chime, or the right type of, you talk about the boots in a Star Destroyer versus the boots, in a Rebel ship, how do they go about that process of selecting the proper one?
It's funny because one thing we didn't include in there because it just took a little bit too much time to explain, but Margie O'Malley and Ronnie Brown, who were the two Foley artists that we talked to, both independently were out shopping one day. Both saw this similar wind chime, which you see in our documentary. One's slightly bigger than the other one, but they're basically the same thing. They're like these almost shell glass chimes that are strung together. So they both separately didn't tell each other that they were doing this. They each bought that wind chime at the stores they were shopping at and brought them in And lo and behold, they were basically about the same thing. And when you combine the different sizes of them and layered them just so, along with they had a tiny little steel necklace that added one more layer, one more dimension to the sound. They just they're both experienced Foley artists, and both just had a feeling that these wind chimes were going to work, and brought them in and saw that the other had done the same, and so that became the basic sound of the Voltex, of the Crystal Fox. So it's crazy stuff like that. And then of course they've got some other stuff in there, and I really should get a picture of it and post it, but they have this thing that they call the Franken gun. And it is you look at it and it looks like there's maybe the centerpiece of like an AK-47, and then there's like a longer barrel that's like duct taped onto the front of that, and then a stock that's connected to it. And like all of these gun pieces don't really go together, but they've made them come together. That Franken gun is the sound that anytime a trooper or a character picks up a blaster, moves it around, drops it, anything with a blaster, not the sound of the actual pew pew, but touching the blaster, moving it around, there's a sound there, and all of those sounds are made with this thing called the Franken gun, which is kind of a crazy thing. So, that the room is filled with stuff like that.
It sounds like paradise. It's amazing.
Yeah. They had an old Macintosh computer that basically you put a pizza stone on that and walk on it, and that's the sound that a character's footsteps make in the Millennium Falcon, for example. And what was really neat was that this team, Ronnie, Frank, and Margie, and Kim, and some others were working on, or are currently working on, Solo. Mm-hmm. And when we got there, we first walked into the Foley room, which is in kind of the lower level of the Skywalker Sound Building. Walked in, and we're all saying hi and kind of figuring out where we're going to shoot and what we're going to shoot. There was a big red cup folder on the desk next to where Frank was working, and I sort of kept inching closer and closer to it, and Finally, they caught on, and that quickly went into a locked filing cabinet, I think. But it was fun because it was neat because they have done all sorts of episodes of Rebels. They did Rogue One all in that relatively small room, and all of the sounds for Last Jedi as well. So they're well versed in Star Wars and well versed in the rules and what makes a good Star Wars sound and what doesn't. And so it was neat. They're a cool team.
Well, one of my favorite parts, beyond the Foley artist, is we have a great kind of behind the scenes part where the sound of the film is devoid of sound, I should actually say. And we're showing them how, let me start that over.
Yeah.
One of my most favorite parts is when we get to see the film devoid of sound, and then we're adding each sound at a time until we actually have the finished product, which the viewer ultimately sees in the theater. And just knowing that it's layer upon layer, and in the particular scene we've got BB-8's rolling noise, and the noise of the creature, and the noise of the background, and the noise of the coins going into BB-8, and so on and so forth. Did you get into a conversation at all when it comes to filling the film with the sound? How much time does that actually take for a 2-hour runtime film? How many hours are poured into the minutia of the sound?
Oh, yeah. I don't know if anybody's actually added it up, but it is an incredible amount of time, because you think every single footstep in that 2 hour and, 15 minutes or whatever it is, film has to be recorded, and you have to line it up just right. And, so there's all the Foley recording that happens, and then all of the layering and the designing, and they do a tremendous amount of work ahead of time. And then Ryan Johnson comes up, and for about 8 weeks, they go through every scene, mix it, make sure that one thing's not too loud, make sure the music sounds right. All of these things are kind of finalized. But it takes so much time. It takes an incredible amount of time. And the sound team is also having to kind of roll with the punches because the movie's being edited and changed, and so every time they shorten a scene or take something out, they have to go back and fix that. So there's a lot of revision that goes on. It's not just a one-time thing. So it's all of this this constant change, really. But Ryan Johnson made a great point. He told me that he says it's hard to describe just how much the final sound design really makes it feel like a movie. He says, all of the pieces are there. You know that everything kind of works, but he says it just doesn't feel like a movie until you get that final sound mix in there to make it really work. And I ran into John Knoll in the hallways at Lucasfilm while we were shooting this, and he asked what we were up to, and I kind of explained it, and he's had such a great thing to say about it. He goes, for months we listened to, or he goes, for months while we're working on the visual effects, we watch them silent.
Wow.
So he goes, it's a real treat when they add the sound to it because it really does. He goes, sound makes the visual effects look better. So that it conveys, it gets inside your brain and really makes your brain believe that what it's seeing is real. So, these guys are getting big props from, one of the biggest visual effects gurus around. Right. So, but yeah, to kind of get back to your question, it's a long time. It's a lot of hours and lots of change.
And that's fascinating to understand that a lot of it's on the fly or constantly changing and shifting. I mean, that seeing what we did see as far as the minutia and attention to detail that's involved, I would assume can maybe in their weaker moments drive them a little nuts.
A little nuts. Yeah, exactly.
If you can reveal, what was something maybe that you saw while you were there that went into the sound production of The Last Jedi that was perhaps most impressive or most surprising that particular instrument or the way that they did something actually translated to that certain sound on screen?
I think it was, I would have to say it's the Foley artists and their performance. For example, the scenes with Rey walking around the island and she's on different surfaces when she's going from dirt to gravel to hard stone, sometimes all in one scene. And I figured that they probably just record these things separately and then paste it in and make it work. But the extent to which even the Foley is a true performance, which they so instead of doing it in pieces, I mean, they have all of these surfaces kind of laid out and they match them up kind of as they go. So as Rey is walking across the screen into one of these stone huts, to knock on Luke's door or whatever it is, they're actually performing that in the room, in real time. And I just thought that was enormously impressive that they would go through all of that when there's probably an easier way to do it. But it's important to them to actually make it a performance. They're performing the sounds of the porg feet on the lightsaber, for example. All of these things that you would just never really think about, they have to do every single movement. And Ren even says it in the documentary. He says, whether or not you hear it or we need to record all this Foley, we do just in case, because you want to have the different layers. You want to have the options, right, to be able to do it. And then the other effect that really, I was really impressed with, that I thought worked, was the Force connection scenes between Rey and Kylo Ren. Because, people have noted that there really are no, visual effects. There's no special effect in that, sequence that you see on screen. It's all just eye lines. They matched eye lines. So even though they're in different spots, they're looking in the correct direction.
Right.
And what makes that sequence work when you really listen to it, the first big one where Rey shoots a hole through the hut and then they come outside and Kylo Ren kind of skitters into the hallway and they're talking to each other. It's this really interesting effect that Ren Klyce came up with, where you actually hear the line coming before it's delivered, if that makes any sense. There's this, they call it a pre-lap. And so they added that along with some reverb at the end of some of these lines. And it just ends up being really effective, as Ryan called it. We wanted to create this idea of an interstellar walkie-talkie where you really get in their heads and feel the emotion of being inside their heads. And so, I thought that was just one of the coolest effects ever.
Oh, I think that whole the Force book connection that some people refer to it was, I think, one of the highlights as far as the sound design goes, and even one of the more intimate, special moments of the entire film, in my opinion. Is there when it comes to you and your fandom, of course, as you mentioned at the get-go, that you have been a fan of the behind-the-scenes stuff and the special effects since the get-go. How does this impact your fandom, though, when you see how those sounds are made? Does it increase fandom, or does it kind of, once you've seen behind the curtain of Oz, does it detract from the viewing experience as a fan?
You know what? For me, it's always kind of this appreciation for how these creative people do their work. So whatever sparkle is taken off of it by having that curtain pulled back, I get back just in seeing the creativity and the creative process. And so that, for me is kind of a balance, but it's a great question. And I'm glad you asked it, because I asked that to Matt Wood, who, has been there for 28 years now. And I said to him, is it weird seeing how the sausage is made, because you were such a fan as a kid and now you see how all the sausage is made? Does it sort of detract from your own experience? Yeah. And for him, he said no, because I get to experience it through other people and I get to see how people react. And so he gets it back that way. So for me, it's kind of a similar thing. It's just seeing how it's all done, makes me appreciate it. And so now I hear new things when I go to see the movie, that I didn't before, or I'm paying attention to things that I didn't pay attention to before, and getting more out of it that way. So yeah, no, seeing how the sausage is made for me doesn't detract from it.
Excellent. Well, Upton Sinclair would be proud of that moment, no doubt.
Exactly. Sinclair references. Exactly.
I know you're a busy guy, Clayton, so let me get you out of here on this one. If you had to pick a favorite sound of yours that is a Star Wars sound, what would that sound be?
Oh my gosh, partially because my son, who's 4, is so into lightsabers. I think we probably have probably 8 or 9 different versions of different lightsabers in our house. I would have to go with the lightsaber. I mean, who hasn't done a lightsaber sound at some point in their adulthood or childhood? I'd have to say that's got to rank up there for sure.
I am with you on that one. And as we land the plane, anything else around the corner that you can give us some heads up on, or all systems quiet right now?
I am looking forward to Solo. We don't have anything quite in the hopper for that yet, but I do have a little profile piece on a legacy Star Wars actor that may be coming down the pike that I can't quite say yet till we get it in the can, but that'll be coming, which I'm very excited about. And then always looking for new things, man.
Awesome. Well, Clayton, as always, it is a pleasure to hang out with you, and thanks for hanging out with us on Unmistakably Star Wars.
I will be here anytime you ask, sir.
Clayton is a fantastic guy. And, I was kind of teasing him a little bit off air. I said, because he had to reschedule our interview last minute because he was working for Nightline.
Oh.
And something came up and he had to fly out of town for Nightline. And he actually called me from the road and he's like, I'm so sorry. And I thought, first off, you don't realize that we once won a contest. You don't know who we are. We're kind of a big deal. But I cut him a little bit of slack.
Well, that's kind of you.
Yeah, well, I thought so too. Thank you, Jeremy, for affirming me in that. But no, he is so generous with his time. And, you know, one of the things that when he and I first talked about a year ago, actually longer than a year ago, you know, he talked that one of the things that really drew him into Star Wars as a fan was all those things that happened behind the scenes, whether it was the sound or the visuals and all those things. And of course, last year, as I mentioned, he with ILM to show us what happened with Rogue One and Tarkin and K2SO and all that. And this was actually the next natural progression for kind of the behind the scenes thing that he's doing. So let's talk first about the documentary itself, the Force of Sound. That's roughly 30 minutes. Hopefully you that are listening to the podcast have had a chance to check that out. If not, we'll put a link for it in our show notes so you can check it out. It is definitely worth your time to take a look at that. Eve, let me come your way first, though. Just in regards to the documentary itself, what stood out to you the most?
It's tough because it was magic. That's taking everyday, old, well-worn, discarded, random objects and turning them into just jewels. That's what it felt like. Just
well put.
Yeah, like a discarded Mac with a pizza stone on top of it became the steps in the Millennium Falcon.
Right.
It was unreal. And I think to have a job like that, I'm open and available. But it was just incredible. It was so interesting and fascinating, and from start to finish. Honestly, I wish it was longer.
So was it for you then, talking about like how they manufacture the sounds for the Millennium Falcon? Was it for you just like the Foley artists that took the everyday objects and actually created sound to match the scenes in Star Wars?
Yes, I think that was definitely it was a love. Like you could see the passion that they had for this. I mean, the one woman was talking about how she's been doing it since the late 70s.
Right,
and it was
right.
It was just that has to be something. Oh, I'm going to go out today and record sounds that will be in a massive blockbuster film a year or two from now. It's so fascinating, and so is the layering of each sound together and creating one whole scene. But that seems overwhelming for me personally.
Well, it's interesting that you brought those two things up, because for me, those two things were absolutely what just rocked my world when it came to getting depth of insight and understanding into. Jeremy, in regards to your viewing of The Force of Sound, what are some of the things that really stood out for you?
Yeah, first, thank you, Clayton. I mean,
right.
What a great job that he and his team did. I mean, it's just so good. And, you know, I think the first thing, and I think I'm kind of siding with Eve here, is just like, man, set a camera up and let me just watch for hours and hours, because I will. Their work is extraordinary, and it is art. I mean, it really is. And I think that was one of the big takeaways, is that no matter, you know, if it's Matt Wood and Ren Cleese, I think that's his name, Cleese, if it's them working at soundboard, you know, at the soundboard or at the computer, to the actual, you know, the Foley artist, like in there really do it. I mean, it was all just so compelling. And I think that's the thing that really jumps out at me, is how there's multiple mediums of art that require collaboration. Yeah. And, you know, whether you're on stage and you're dealing with set design and the actors and the director and maybe an orchestra, if you have music involved, I mean, that's a big collaborative effort. And there's other art forms as well. But film, and specifically like the Hollywood film, like the big budget, it's insane. The amount of collaboration. And I think what Clayton's doing by putting a spotlight on this, and there's other documentaries out there, it's just reminding us that sound is so vitally important, and that it can really make scenes and break a scene too. And there's a really interesting website by it's literally called StephenFollows.com, and what it is it's film data and education. So go check it out. It's StephenFollows.com, and it just has a wealth of information. And listen to this. This is crazy. I was curious about how many people work on a movie, because I wanted to know how many people were working on like with sound in a film. And Student Follows basically this is data compiled between 1994 and 2013. So it was before the Star Wars films, but I think I can find some comparable ones. But listen to this. 3,310 people worked on Iron Man 3.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
2,984 worked on Avatar. So that's just the actors, director, everybody involved, right? And what's amazing is what the data does is it breaks it down by who was doing which job, cameras to all that stuff. And sound was really interesting. So on average, you're looking at there were 71 people that worked on Titanic on sound alone.
Wow.
The great classic Speed 2 cruise control.
Yes.
89 working on sound. So
wow. And it was still a crappy film.
But not because of sound.
But the average number working on a Hollywood project is, according to those numbers from 94 to 2013, was almost 600.
Wow, that's truly incredible. And I think that we get a small glimpse into that if you're sticking around for the credits for The Last Jedi is a great example. I mean, it was just the font size was so small because they had to fit so many names. People. It was absolutely crazy. One of the things that stood out for me, and Eve, you touched on this, is that great shot in the documentary with Ren Kleiss and Matt Wood that have the one scene of BB-8 in the Canto Bight Casino and literally going from no sound to here's what coins going into BB-8 sounds like. Here's what BB-8 in motion sounds like with coins, without coins. Here's the background and all these things that once they're put together and all the levels and layers are put together, just absolutely blew me away. Like how nuanced of an art it is. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
Bex, weigh in a little bit. When it came to Clayton's interview, what are some of the things that stood out for you that he had to say that went beyond the documentary?
The thing I mean, Eve already touched on this, but the thing I liked most was talking about the Foley artists and how they find the sounds and then manipulate them to become what we know as Star Wars.
Right.
And I mean, it always is amazing to me. I was looking into it more, and like TIE fighters are made by elephant calls and manipulating elephant calls. I'm like, that doesn't sound like an elephant call at all.
Right.
How did they do that?
Yeah.
And so I think
they squeezed them really tight.
Really tight.
Gosh. Squeeze what really tight?
Yes, exactly right. Thank you. As you well know, Jeremy. So, one of the things that brings up, though, right, is the Foley artists. Look, I'm a big fan of 1930s, 1940s radio drama. And
absolutely.
One of the things that I get my students on every swinging year is I start off, I create a fake web page, and I make it look like an actual event is taking place. And I walk into the classroom completely like panic-stricken. I'm on my phone. I sound like I'm panicked in the conversation, and nobody's on the phone with me, right? I'm just like, okay, I got to call you back. And they're just like, what's going on? And so I click on the TV in the room, which is already set up to look like the webpage and stuff. And I say, listen, here's my line. Sometimes we study history. Sometimes we're part of history. And I tell them to put all their devices away. So,
oh man,
not because it's serious, because I don't want them to check and call me on my bluff. And I go through this, and what's fascinating is a couple years ago, I did such a good job scamming them that I had one girl in absolute tears. And I know I shouldn't feel proud of myself for that.
You were of the world to them.
And here's what I do is I let them off the hook, and letting them off the hook after I've got them riveted and going like the world's going to end, right? I say, in the early 20th century, a guy named Orson Welles produced a radio show that people thought was the real deal. And then some of the students are just like, oh, we've been had. And some of them still haven't connected the dots, right? And so I'm going to tell them, and then I'll actually play part of the War of the Worlds radio broadcast and let them understand no, the Foley artists were so amazing during this live broadcast that it fooled thousands of people across the land, called their police. Grandpa ran outside with a shotgun ready to kill some aliens, and it was just people were besides themselves. It was that convincing. Eve, let me turn it to you. When it comes to Clayton's interview, was there something that really added to your viewing of the documentary, or was there something new that came up that you really felt like, oh wow, that's a great insight?
Basically him championing sound over ILM, for example. I think I love the lesser known, not lesser known, but the less focused on groups of people who are involved in making huge movies. I love them getting the spotlight. And him mentioning that kind of from the get-go, I was like, oh, this is going to be good. Like, because we all have seen documentaries about every CGI graphic in Transformers movies and everything else. And that's great. And it is amazing. And I would never take it for granted, I hope, ever. But with sound, I think it is very often overlooked. So I thought it was that right from the get-go, I was like leaning in, like, tell me more.
Yeah, I think so, right? Like, it's almost a shame that was only a 30-minute documentary. And, we had whatever, a 20, 25-minute conversation after that. And I think, Eve, you bring up a great point that sound is so often overlooked as an art and what it brings to the film. And like I said, I was absolutely blown away, the different layers that go into it and everything else. Jeremy, let me come to you. When it comes to some of the things that Clayton said, and, he was actually, I believe at one point referred to Ben Burtt and talked about sound being 50% of the film. And you had mentioned earlier that you had some students create and produce some top-notch student films. What is your immediate reaction when you hear things like Ben Burtt, who literally came up with the term sound designer, say that sound is 50% of the film?
Yeah, I don't want to say, nope, you're wrong, because, he is an expert. And I think whether it's 50% or not, who knows? I don't know how you can quantify that or like get data for that. But it is so vitally important. And, I do this, when I'm playing with my kids, one of the things they love to do is they love to play the video game Minecraft. And we laugh and we say, we're going to do family Minecraft time. So it's literally me and my 3 kids, and we just play split screen together, and we're laughing and creating. And my son, who's 6, we dig down into the earth. And when you go down into the ground, there's a cave sound effect, and it's real ominous. And whenever that sound effect comes on, my son he's startled, and he looks at me real scared. He's like, oh, we're in the cave, and Dad, what are we going to do? And I think sometimes we forget how vitally important sound is. It does make you believe, like the documentary was talking about, and Clayton was talking about just in his interview with you, Devin, and it really is so extraordinarily powerful. And just take a moment and go back to Star Wars. All the sounds, not necessarily like sound effects necessarily like a blaster, but like maybe the Kylo Ren Rey when they're their Skype calls,
right. Right. Force Book Live. Yeah.
Yeah, and just talking about how they were creating the vacuum and just the thought that goes into it and what that does to us as an audience. I'm still just enamored with your conversation with Clayton, but then Clayton's work on the documentary. It really puts a spotlight on something that frankly needs it. And looking at the other films for the Academy Awards, I really think, and yes, I'm a Star Wars fan, but I loved Blade Runner. I loved, Dunkirk. I really do think The Last Jedi has the best sound work this year in the Academy Awards. I hope they win. I would love to see Matt Wood and Ren Cleese go up there, and Ben Burtt. I would love to see those guys win stuff. So
yeah, absolutely. Stop shafting Star Wars in the awards, would you?
Yes.
Let me ask this, and Jeremy, let me stick with you with this, and then I'll throw it around the horn. But beyond Star Wars, like what are some films that you think really are made, quote unquote, because of the sound design that goes into that? Some of the more memorable things. You mentioned Star Wars and the fact that like it's so distinctive, right? And they mentioned in the documentary, and Clayton touches on again, like, oh no, we not only believe what we see, that that makes that sound, but those sounds are so ingrained into our DNA. Like, we know when we hear that it's somebody's ringtone or whatever else. Like, that's that's a Wookiee, that's a TIE fighter, that's whatever. But are there other films out there that you can think of, Jeremy, that perhaps you're a personal fan of or you're just aware of that have a similar kind of feel to it when it's just ingrained in us and we realize that that sound is connected to that film?
You know, that's a great question. And I mean, when you look at the landscape of film, personally, I mean, think about with Star Wars, how many sounds are famous?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The lightsaber, the blaster, the TIE fighter. I mean, it go like R2-D2.
Right.
You know, it's just so the Wookiee sound. I mean, it is amazing to me how so many of the sound effects are so famous. And when you look at other films, I can't think of a lot that are as famous. Some of Cameron's work, obviously,
Sure.
like his film Aliens, there's some sound effects in that with the aliens themselves,
Right.
That's pretty like compelling,
Right.
that the other films have duplicated and
Yeah.
used. So, and Avatar, Cameron has they did some amazing work with sound in that. But aside from Cameron, there's a few others out there, but there's none that really leap out at me as just when you say famous sound effects or
Right.
famous sound design.
Right.
I don't know. Can you guys think of anything that jumps out as in terms of like, oh, that film has like really famous sounds that can compete with Star Wars? I can't when I think about it.
Yeah, actually, for me, it's Jurassic Park.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Because, like,
That's a good call.
you know, you hear those dinosaur noises and you know immediately, oh crap, there's a raptor behind me.
Wow.
I gotta go.
Oh, that's a good call.
Yeah.
That's a good call.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say like the Wayne Knight.
Oh, that's a good one too. Yep, that works.
Eve, how about you? Any other film sounds that really are identifiable or identify that film that they're associated with instantly?
This is an incredibly hard to call. Oh my gosh. I feel like Star Wars just wins across the board. Yes, Jurassic Park definitely with the T-Rex. Like if I ever meet a T-Rex one day and it doesn't sound like that, I'm going to be really upset.
You're dead. By that time, you're dead. You're gone.
It won't matter.
Yeah, you're done.
It's a good way to go.
Yeah.
But, one of the this isn't so much as identifiable, but and I'm sorry, everybody knows this movie, but I'm going to say it. But Titanic, I think the sounds of that ship breaking apart, and just the metal work that went into that just must have been massive. And every time I watch it, I'm always like, I would probably die of a panic attack long before I went down. Just
Forget
from
freezing.
Them down below.
Yes.
Yeah, because I would not be on the upper deck. Let's be real. So I'd be down there watching the metal.
Down in the steerage, yes. So I'm gonna throw two out here that I think you hear the sound and you can instantly identify what it's associated with, and I will say the creature sound from Predator.
Yes.
I think that's super distinctive, and I'm gonna go a step further, and this might even be have more notoriety, and that is the sound from Friday the 13th. I think that is instantly associated. Bex, you've got like this freaked out look on your face right now.
I've never seen it.
Oh, you've never seen it.
Me
Wow.
either. I've never seen them.
I don't like horror films.
Put that on the shelf next to Rebels. So
there's another.
Yeah.
There's another one.
Yeah.
That I think when I say it, you're like, oh yeah, The Matrix. The sound of The Matrix. There's a lot of sound effects in The Matrix. It won in the 1999 Academy Awards. It won for both sound mixing and sound editing.
That's a good call.
And that's a big one. And then Titanic also won, I think, for both categories. The Lord of the Rings films also have. I know Return of the King won, but there's a lot of sound effects, like when Frodo puts on the ring. The horses, the charging,
right.
the sounds of magic. So there's a lot. I think when you would hear those effects, you'd be like, oh yeah, I know that. I recognize that.
Sure.
But when you put all these up against Star Wars, it's like, no, it's just amazing how famous the sound is in Star Wars.
Yeah, and I think that one of the documentaries I was watching today about sound actually talked about like the sound bank is right around 5,000 distinct sounds for Star Wars right now, and growing with every film.
Wow.
And that you think about how many sounds that is. My goodness. And you go back to the documentary and you look at like how nuanced, feeling that scene, the completed scene that they showed us in the documentary was maybe 10 seconds long, and how many layers went into that and the timing that went into that and fading this up and fading that out. And that's, my goodness, that's crazy. All right. So let me ask this. I'm going to start with you, Bex. What is your favorite Star Wars sound?
Oh, that's a hard one. Favorite Star
Just give me
Wars
one.
sound?
It doesn't have to be the favorite. Just give me what's your go-to sound when you're driving the car and you think nobody's watching? You're singing in the shower and you think nobody's listening.
Oh gosh. Probably the Wookiee call.
I like it. All right. So now my next question for you, Bex, is we want to hear a sample.
Nope.
Oh my gosh. That's not fair.
I'm shown up by my 5-year-old on that.
Okay, fair enough. He does have a good Wookiee call.
He does.
He does. Eve, let's swing it over to you. Favorite Star Wars sound?
Okay, I have two. The first one's kind of basic B a little bit. But I love the lightsaber. That just, I mean...
The ignition, the clashing, the swinging around, or just all of it together?
Igniting it.
Yeah, super
that
distinctive.
First, yeah, just think like Vader at the end of Rogue One. When that happened, I went nuts.
Feels.
And then the second one, which is a close second, is the TIE Fighter. Zipping on.
Yeah, that's a good call. Jeremy, how about you?
Ooh, this is hard. I would say, I would agree with the lightsaber, but then I would also, for me, the sound of the Falcon, just in flight. I love that sound.
Yeah.
It just screams badassery.
Yes.
And then the sound going to light speed. I love that sound effect. So I love those, but man, the lightsaber, I'm with you. It's the ignite, when it's, lit up, man.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
And, it communicates so much, whether if it's Vader in Rogue One, it's like, oh no, it's over.
Right.
But also, when Luke ignites it in, like Return of the Jedi, when he catches it from R2, at Jabba's sail bar, like that scene is like, it's you're elated, especially when you go from him losing his lightsaber in Empire and then to Return of the Jedi. I love that sequence, but lightsaber, but then sound effects related to the Falcon. So
good calls all the way around. I gotta go. I guess I'll throw out two. I think probably toward the top of the list is if you go to the original Star Wars, A New Hope. There's that one sound where 3PO shuts off. And that just, it just really just, it's like, wow, that sound is just, it's just like a little slice of heaven. It's just like, oh.
You just record that.
It's like, yeah. I gotta go. Like, there's something about, the sound of the X-Wings in flight that does something for me. I guess it's just, I don't know what it is. But it's just that whole sound that I'm so tempted to give the, demonstration of it, but I'll blow it, so I won't. But it's just like, there's something about that. There's just something about it for me. No, good try though. Hey, I want to ask this though. When it comes to you guys hear that?
Oh my goodness.
Great shot, kid. That was one in a million. One in a million.
I got a bad feeling about this.
Oh my goodness. It's time once again for our weekly game, Great Shot or Bad Feeling, Sound Design Edition. So we're going to take a modified version of the rules this time. So instead of giving me a reply of great shot or bad feeling, I'm actually going to give you the sound effect from Star Wars. And I want you to tell me what created that sound effect. And if you do, you get a point. If you get the most points at the end of the contest, then you win something amazing. Amazing.
Well, I'm all in that.
Yeah,
Let's go.
An entire box of the Force coming to you. All right. Bex, I'm going to give this to you since you already opened this package. But here is your Star Wars sound effect. All right, Bex.
I
What is it?
said that. It's the elephant.
It is the elephant. All right. You got a point. You're on the board.
Woo! Go team.
Working your way to Fangirl of the Day. All right. I like it.
I'm coming for you, Eve.
All right. Eve, coming your way next. Here we go. Here is your Star Wars sound effect.
I promise not to look anything up. I have no clue.
So that is the blaster. All forms of the blaster are made the same way. So any idea what makes the blaster sound in Star Wars?
Maybe a thin sheet of metal just being flopped around. I don't know.
Wow, you were no, you weren't. Anybody else? Jeremy, you have an idea of what makes the blaster sound in Star Wars?
Is he hitting like a wire or something like that, like a
metal
wire?
He's got a hammer or a metal wrench, and he's hitting a guy wire that is anchoring down an antenna that he just happened. That was the first sound that he created for Star Wars, and he wasn't even working on Star Wars at that time. He was just cruising around the country and actually
just making sounds.
Just making sounds. Just making sounds. And he literally said, like, oh, that sounds like a laser blast. And then guess what? That is the sound of every laser blast in Star Wars, whether it's tweaked a little bit or not. Okay, Jeremy, here is your sound. That, of course, is the sound of the AT-ATs. Not AT-ATs, the AT-ATs, the Imperial Walkers. Jeremy, what makes that sound?
I don't know, but here's my guess. It's a broken washing machine in slow motion.
Yeah.
Wow!
That's excellent.
That is an awesome guess. It's wrong, but that was an awesome guess. So it's actually recorded in a Berkeley warehouse. It is the sound of an industrial metal cutting machine. As big sheets of metal are coming off the press, it's the guillotine that cuts them into pieces. Awesome. Oh. I know. By the way, we should say, if this is going to spoil Star Wars for you, it's a good time to just fast forward through this part of the pod. All right, Bex, we are back to you. And, you mentioned this, I believe, earlier too. So here is your Star Wars sound. That, of course, is my stomach if I don't have dinner on time, but that is the Wookiee sound in various forms. What makes up the Wookiee sound?
It's not your stomach.
It is not my stomach. Okay. It's a similar sound, but it's not actually it.
It's got to be like various animals.
Well, I'll tell you what, you're on the right path. There are 7 different animals that make up the various Wookiee sounds. Can you give me a couple of them?
One?
Yeah, give me a couple of them.
We'll say a lion. I don't know.
What besides lions?
What besides lions?
And lions and blank and blank.
Lions and tigers and bears.
Okay, so that's 2 of them. So tigers and bears. Here are the 7 animals. Bears, lions, cannibals, badgers, walruses, tigers, and wait for it, rabbits. Rabbits.
Wow. And camels.
And camels.
Rabbits and camels.
Rabbles and camels. Oh, my. All right. Let's see. We're going back to Eve. Eve, here is your Star Wars sound. All right, Eve, you have the Tusken Raiders, the proverbial sand people, the Tatooine indigenous peoples. What makes that sound?
The very first sound definitely sounded like a hungry stomach.
Truth.
It really did.
Truth.
It really did.
Yes.
Everything after that, I don't know, a barking, some sort of mammal. I don't know.
A barking mammal. His name is Chad, and he lives down on the south side of town. So I'm gonna tell you what it is, and you're gonna say, "Oh, of course that's what it is." It is a braying donkey. A braying donkey. And of course they just kind of play with the sound a little bit, but it's actually the recording of a braying donkey. See, now
not what I thought.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting. All right, Jeremy, coming your way. And actually you mentioned this earlier. So here is your Star Wars sound. That, of course, is the Falcon going to hyperspace. So we're looking for specifically the hyperspace sound. What makes that sound, Jeremy?
Oh, my goodness. I have no idea. I wonder if it's a like a metal sheet and then something rolling down it or something like that. That's all I can come up with.
Okay.
I think it's obviously, I think there's several things combined, but I think maybe that's part of it. I don't know.
Yeah. Once again, second place is first place loser. The sound of the Millennium Falcon going to hyperspace is actually dual recordings of jets played out of sync with one another. Dual recordings of jets played out of sync. Yeah, I know that was your next guess. I know. It was on the tip of your tongue. I know. All right, Bex, this one I've got for you because this is, at least was, your son's favorite character. Here is your Star Wars sound. That, of course, is General Grievous's cough. So what goes to make up that sound?
Someone with emphysema.
You're actually pretty close. While filming episode 3, George Lucas had bronchitis, and they recorded him coughing, and that is General Grievous's cough.
Do I get
sound.
the point? Is that
you
like
get the
close
point?
enough?
Yeah, you were in the neighborhood. Half point awarded. I believe you're in the lead with 1.5 points.
Go Bex.
Yes.
All right, Eve, let's come back to you. Here is your Star Wars sound.
I have no idea.
That, of course, is the original turning off the tractor beam on the Death Star. No idea what makes that? What's your best guess?
It's turning something off. It's an electronic of some sort, but I'm just blank. I can't even speak now. I don't know.
No, it's okay. No need to speak. We'll take interpretive dances. So that is the sound. Those are actually hijacked from Flash Gordon. Mind you, not the one that has Queen in the soundtrack, but nonetheless, Flash Gordon, the early serials for the 1930s and 40s. All right, Jeremy, back to you. And listen, since you saw The Phantom Menace in the theater 13 times...
11. Come on.
Sure it was. And here is your Star Wars sound. That, of course, are the pod racers on Tatooine. Jeremy, what makes the pod racer sounds?
Various car engines. I don't know.
Wow, you got part of it. Yeah, you got race car engines. There's one other device used in mixing that. Any idea at all?
Maybe it is striking some sort of metal like can or like some sort of barrel or something like that. That's all I can think of.
You are fascinated by the metal striking tonight.
You never know.
Never know. Bound to get it right at some point. So you got the race car part, right? So it's different race cars, but it's also, wait for it, electric toothbrushes. Of
course.
Yes. I know.
Of course. That makes so much sense.
I know, right? I know. All right. So, Jeremy, we'll give you half a point. All right.
Hey.
So, Eve, I'm trying to get you back in the game with this one. All right. So I'm going to come back to you. I'm going out of order, trying to get you back in the game. So here is your Star Wars sound.
Oh, gosh.
All right. That, of course, is the dentist drill. No, it's a lightsaber. The lightsaber. What are your thoughts on that? What do you think creates the lightsaber?
I feel like I should know this, and I should have looked it up 20 years ago.
Specifically for tonight, yes.
Yes. You made me promise not to look anything up.
Well, yeah, I had to, right?
I don't know. It sounds like a bunch of things, but a power line.
Okay.
Like the ones I know I think it's in India, but certain power lines are so loud and emanate such noise that could be something similar to that. But
wow,
we don't live in...
I tell you what, you were darn close. And since you brought up multiculturalism on Unmistakably Star Wars, we will award you a half a point. It is a combination of two things. It's one of the things that was a 35 millimeter reel-to-reel projector down at, I believe it was the USC Film School. There's one of the first recordings that Ben Burtt did. And then part of it also is sounds picked up from his TV set as well. And then, of course, waving a mic around in the air gives it kind of that swoosh feel that's a little programmed when it comes to the actual tweaking of the sound. So it's a combination of all those things. All right, Bex. You have 1.5 points. Your competitors have a half a point each.
Okay.
Would you like to go double or nothing? Win it all?
I've already won it all.
No, because I make up the rules as I go along. So you haven't won anything.
I have a point and a half because I got hitting the wire.
Oh, that's true.
So don't I have a point and a half?
Okay, it's tie game. Tie game.
All right.
What,
wait,
Eve? Yeah,
wait
okay.
a minute.
Everybody's
Then
got a point and a
I
half.
2.5 points.
You don't because I'm the judge. All right.
Point and a half.
Everybody has a point and a half.
Oh.
All right. So, but here's a question about Ewoks. Oh. So Bex, you better get this.
No, not if I have to.
Give me.
Turn your card if you get it wrong.
Right. Exactly. You can just give me one. There are 3 native languages that were used to mix and create the Ewok language. I'll take just one of them. Just one of them.
3 languages?
3 languages mixed together, layered, and they came up with the Ewok language.
I would say some form of Native American language.
Okay, Native American language. All right, incorrect. Eve.
Well, there goes
for the win.
I don't know. I don't know.
Close, but not quite.
So close.
Jeremy.
I'm gonna go Africa, Swahili.
Wow. Okay, well, you were at least on the proper continent for a little while. So Ewoks are made up of a little bit of, well, I guess you actually weren't on the right continent, but you were close enough. You were the closest continent. They're a combination of Tibetan, Mongolian, and Nepali languages layered on top of each other. So I think there might even be, there's some crossover to Indiana Jones with that too, with the whole Nepal thing, right? Is that right? I don't know. Maybe. Thinking maybe.
Sure.
Absolutely. Sure. My goodness. Tough crown tonight. Hey, we'll be right back after this to wrap things up. Stick around.
We're not done yet.
Wrap it up.
All right, we are going to wrap things up this week. And hey, guess what? Our Fanfic February has come to a close. Everyone that submitted, thank you so much for trusting us and I guess the rest of the Twitterverse and the interwebs with your fanfic. I know that can be a very courageous move to put yourself and your writings, your creation out there. So thank you for trusting us with that. Everyone did a great job. We will be announcing the winners next week on the pod. And for those of you that want to watch that live on the Twitter, you can catch our broadcast. Usually starts around 7:15 p.m. Pacific time, 10:15 p.m. Eastern time, and the next day in other parts of the world. I don't have my world clock in front of me. But we so appreciate you giving us your creation. That has been awesome to read and to share with other people. Listen, I want to throw this out there as well. If you have another idea that can bring fan engagement around fan creation, whether it's cosplay or whatever else, I don't even know. I'm just throwing this out there kind of on the fly. But we would love to hear some ideas of something else we can do to bring folks together and have a good, fun, positive experience and kind of sharing our creative side with one another. As always, we want to thank you for hanging out with us each and every week. We absolutely consider each and every one of you part of our extended family. It is because of you that we show up and do this. And my wife lets me get away with a midlife crisis. So thank you for being part of my midlife crisis and for hanging out with us all. We enjoy being in this thing called fandom together. And of course, we want to thank all of our patrons, meaning Brandon Boylan, Dave Hackerson, Michelle Grandine, Neil Lowry, Regina Sanders, Connie Shee, Christus Molinsky, Franklin Taylor, Amy Wishman, and of course, our mystery donor that I'm about to whore myself out for.
Do it.
Love C-3PO. And if you are watching live on Twitter right now, I have got my 12-inch C-3PO figure right here. And watch this. I am kissing that golden droid. Kissing that golden droid. I'm so cheap. It's ridiculous. So cheap, it's ridiculous. Bought. I am easily bought. Listen, we know that it is a sacrifice to you, and we appreciate you trusting us, and we are very humbled by your donations on Patreon. So thank you so much for going out of your way and trusting us as part of your content for Star Wars information. That is going to do it for this week, my little tauntauns. The circle is now complete. We'll see you again in the digital docking bay, and until then, may the Force be with you.
Unmistakably Star Wars is a member of the Star Wars Escape Pods Network. Explore more great content and get to know our sister shows at weareescapepods.com and on Twitter at weareescapepods. The Star Wars Escape Pods Network, promoting positivity in fandom.
This party's over.
Gotta have me some tauntauns in there. Good night, Twitter.